danger can be sometimes much closer than we think. It is difficult to judge a person without knowing their past. Even a church pastor can have skeletons in the closet that are better left undiscovered. However, if you remain unaware, you could become their next victim. Rebekah Guy was born on March 26, 1988. She grew up with her three siblings in the Midlands. She graduated from school in 2007, and a few years after receiving her diploma, she gave birth to a boy named Convoy. During this period, the heroine of our story was in a relationship, but after some time, she decided to break up with the child's biological father. Despite this, both parents kept in touch and worked hard to be good mother and father. Rebekah had a strong personality. She worked diligently to provide for her son with everything he needed. She began her career in cosmetology and later got a job as a saleswoman at a retail cosmetics store. Gradually, Becky moved up to a management position at the store. At the same time, as a young mother, she managed to find a trailer home for rent in Broomfield Township. Life here was lively. She met a guy named Aaron, who became her life partner. From the very beginning, her lover treated her and Convoy wonderfully and proposed after just a month of dating. They planned a wedding together, while her mother Sally was engaged to a man named John Dew. During this period, John played a significant role in Rebekah's life. He was the pastor of a local church and lived in the same trailer park. The story unfolds on the eve of Halloween 2012. On October 30th, Rebekah spent time with her son, as it was important for him to celebrate his favorite holiday with his mother. They carefully prepared and decorated the house and picked out costumes. In the evening, she talked with her mother and later with her fiancé, Aaron, on the phone, discussing their plans for the next day. In the morning, she planned to take her son to his father. Convoy was supposed to stay with him until 4:30 p.m., after which they were going to collect candy together. However, on October 31st, Rebekah unexpectedly did not go to work and also did not get in touch all day. One of her colleagues at work was Aaron's sister, who management asked to call him to find out where Rebekah was. Unfortunately, he didn't know where his fiancée was either. As a result, the store management invited Aaron's sister to accompany him to the trailer park to check on Rebekah. When they arrived, they noticed that the house, which had been decorated for Halloween, was empty. They knocked, but no one answered. When Rebekah's colleague was about to leave, she noticed a car resembling a pickup truck a few hundred meters away. It seemed strange, since Rebekah didn't have any reason to park there. There was a bar nearby, and perhaps Rebekah decided to have drinks on Halloween Eve, but this was completely inconsistent with her habits. The car appeared as if it had been deliberately driven there and abandoned to blend into the surrounding forest. Aaron and his sister entered the establishment, but the bartender said that Rebekah had not come in that evening. Aaron then decided to contact the owner of the house that Rebekah rented, asking to use his key to get inside and see if everything was okay. It was strange that the young mother had simply disappeared and had not gotten in touch, especially given her excellent health. Her relatives suspected that something unpleasant might have happened. Perhaps she had felt ill and lost consciousness, in which case she would have urgently needed help. The owner arrived home and opened the door. Inside, nothing suspicious was found, except for Rebekah's purse, which she always took with her. Everything looked even stranger and more alarming, prompting them to contact the police and report her disappearance. From the very beginning, law enforcement officers showed little enthusiasm for the investigation. After the woman's disappearance, they believed that she was an adult and was not obliged to report to anyone. Perhaps she had gone to a party or to a friend's house. It was decided to wait until 4:30 p.m. that day, as Rebekah was supposed to pick up Convoy from his biological father. When she did not appear at the specified time, the tension escalated. The police finally decided to act. First, they inspected the car and the house of the missing woman. During their investigation, law enforcement officers discovered an area on the carpet with a barely noticeable red stain that was lighter than the rest of the surface. Such marks usually remain after an attempt to remove some kind of contamination. It was likely blood. Additionally, there were signs of a struggle in the house. The front door was not broken into, and when examining the car, the police immediately noticed that the last driver was probably not Rebekah. She was petite, and the driver's seat was adjusted for a much larger person. Given the evidence found, the detectives decided to consider this case a potential crime committed by someone in their 20s. But why were there no signs of a break-in? It was likely that the missing person knew her abductor. The investigators began to scrutinize Rebekah's social circle more closely. In her immediate circle, there were no potentially dangerous individuals. She could not have been with anyone harmful. She was always a very kind and bright person, had not been involved in any criminal episodes, and avoided contact with potentially dangerous individuals. Among her relatives, there was no one who could raise a hand against her. The detectives believed she could have become a victim of a random psychopath, so they checked all the local former criminals listed in the database of those especially prone to sexually motivated attacks. But even here, it was a failure. No one was found to be suspicious. The missing child's father said he had communicated with Rebekah the night before. However, she never called him on Halloween Day when she was supposed to pick up the boy for their joint holiday. Detectives checked Rebekah's cell phone and discovered that she had been receiving messages until the early morning of Halloween. However, unexpectedly, a message sent around 6:30 a.m. never reached the recipient, which could only mean that her cell phone was turned off at that time. The first people investigators wanted to talk to were the biological father of the child and her boyfriend, Aaron. As is usual in such cases, partners are often involved. Perhaps a former or current fiancé was hiding important information. Aaron had a reliable alibi, and after communicating with him, he was removed from the list of suspects. The child's father also did not appear suspicious. He spoke well of his ex, despite their breakup, which, as it turned out, had gone well. None of them held any resentment or anger toward each other. The parents maintained a warm relationship for the sake of their child. The child's father also mentioned that the morning of Rebekah's disappearance was no different from usual. During this period, her mother's fiancé, John White, who helped Rebekah with her child, dropped the boy off at 8:30 a.m., said hello, and left. This time was no different from the usual routine. Detectives decided to talk to John in the hope that he would notice something unusual. He was the pastor of a local church, a decent person who was respected. The man willingly joined the investigation and described in detail the morning on which Rebekah allegedly disappeared. The pastor said that he woke up earlier than usual and went to see Rebekah around 6:30 a.m. He saw that the light was on. Although the door was not locked, he assumed that Rebekah was awake and waiting for him to help get the baby ready. It turned out that she was in the bathroom preparing for her work shift. John said that she allowed him to lie down on the sofa and take a nap while waiting for the baby to wake up. He did so around 8 a.m., and when the boy woke him up, John found that Rebekah was nowhere to be found, as she had to leave for work. He thought she had left, so he collected the child and took him to his father at 8:30 a.m., as he usually did on such days. Despite John's seemingly good history, detectives were alarmed by the fresh scratches on his nose and hands, which looked like defensive wounds. According to the pastor, he was working in his garage on Halloween Day when a wooden shelf fell on him, causing the scratches. 55-year-old John had an impeccable reputation. No one would have thought that such a decent person was capable of crime. Detectives continued their search and interviewed other witnesses and Rebekah's acquaintances. However, the longer the police spoke with the immediate circle of the missing woman, the more suspicious John became. Many stated that despite his full support and help with the child, Rebekah repeatedly expressed feeling uncomfortable in his presence. He was too intrusive. One of her friends even said that the young mother was considering moving because of this neighborhood, which seemed strange since she generally liked living in the trailer park. Colleagues described John as someone who could appear at any time and in any place where Rebekah was, almost as if he were stalking her. He often came to work with her and could engage in conversation for a long time, making it seem that Rebekah was genuinely uncomfortable around him. Following this, the authorities approached Rebekah's father and asked him to take a polygraph test. Suddenly, the man began to have doubts. He insisted that he did not believe in this method due to its high error rate. Despite their efforts, they could not persuade him to participate. During communication with detectives, John admitted why he didn't want to take the polygraph test. According to his confession, he had been mistakenly convicted in the past due to participation in a criminal episode that had been unfairly attributed to him. John believed. Ultimately, the attacker was tried in court and sentenced to imprisonment for a term of 10 years, with the right to parole after 5 years. In addition, he was required to undergo a course of rehabilitation and consultation with a psychiatrist. In 1983, 2 years after his conviction, he decided to appeal the court decision. White claimed that his lawyer did not act in his interests, having received money for it. As a result, the court met him halfway, as if by magic. The danger was that the criminal was released after only 2 years in prison, facing another 2 years of probation and forced psychiatric treatment. Even worse, Teresa was never notified about the release of her tormentor. She accidentally ran into him on the street, later describing this meeting as a nightmare from which she could not wake up. John greeted her, standing and looking at her with the same ominous smile. Teresa moved out of the basement in horror because she could not feel safe in the same city as a maniac. But even this was not the end of John White's criminal story. 10 years passed. He still lived in the same area, was married, and had 2 children. In addition, his wife was pregnant with their 3rd child. However, all this did not help the criminal cope with his deviations. In July 1994, a 20-year-old woman named Vicky Shue disappeared under strange circumstances. She lived near White. During the investigation, the missing person was traced using CCTV footage until she got into an unidentified black pickup truck driven by a white man with a beard. According to detectives, the driver of this vehicle resembled John White, and his car matched the one caught on camera. Unfortunately, it was not possible to see the license plate. When John was interrogated and shown the recording, he admitted that he and Vichy had an affair. According to his statements, he actually picked her up that evening from the parking lot so that they could have fun in secret from his wife. But after several hours, he claimed he drove his mistress back to the local supermarket and dropped her off. Rebekah's further fate was unknown to him. However, the police suspected that John was lying. Unfortunately, there were no cameras in that location to confirm these suspicions. According to his wife, he suffered from schizophrenia, and when he did something, he could be in a state as if he was watching himself from the side. A few days after this interrogation, John tried to take his own life, which only strengthened the authorities' suspicions that he might have felt guilt for what he had done. Therefore, it was decided to confiscate his car for forensic examination. Unfortunately, at that time, DNA tests were just emerging and were not yet actively used in forensic science. Therefore, the police had a limited choice of methods. They used the good old luminol. As soon as it was sprayed inside the cabin, they found several stains that had clearly been attempted to be cleaned out. It was obvious that several large traces of blood remained, but they were all contaminated, making it impossible to obtain clean materials for future examinations. 6 weeks passed since Rebekah's disappearance. An accidental witness, walking about 2 kilometers from the parking lot where John picked up his mistress, found traces of dragging on the ground. Curious, he followed the trail, which led him to women's clothing and, in high grass, the badly decomposed body of the missing person. The witness immediately called the police. Unfortunately, the condition of the remains was so deplorable that the criminologist was unable to gather much information. The victim was naked, with a bra left wrapped around her neck. According to the forensic expert, strangulation by foreign objects was the cause of death. Thanks to a dental examination, it was confirmed that the deceased was Vicky. After this, it was decided to arrest John for murder. During this period, he had managed to find a psychiatric hospital in Kalamazoo, which alerted the investigators. They discovered that during the first trial after the attack on the girl, White had attempted to attribute his act to insanity. Now, the situation seemed structured similarly. He approached the matter more thoroughly and took advantage of the break to go to a psychiatric hospital. Unfortunately, law enforcement officers at that time did not have enough strong grounds to bring murder charges. Victory in court was in significant doubt. Unexpectedly, John took the opportunity and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. At that time, according to state law, the maximum sentence he could receive was 8 to 15 years. Even the psychiatrist who worked with John insisted that he needed to be completely isolated from society, as he posed a serious threat to everyone around him. He had already been declared insane, according to experts. He was supposed to end up in a psychiatric hospital for an indefinite period. In conversations with the psychiatrist, he admitted that he had long fantasized about killing Vicky. For all this, White ended up behind bars for murder. In 2007, John was released. As it turned out, no one was monitoring him. White wasn't even included in the list of criminals prone to sexual assault. All this looked even more alarming against the backdrop of the fact that even his own son believed that his father had serious mental problems and needed qualified help. While behind bars, John was actively involved in religion and received pastoral credentials. After serving his entire sentence, he decided to leave his past behind and move to become a church minister. The detectives were astonished when they realized that only a few in his new circle knew John's real story. Even his wife Sally and Rebekah were unaware of his past. Those who knew of his sins believed that John had reformed and deserved a chance at a new life. Instead of telling his loved ones about the attacks on Teresa and Vicky, John concocted various fables that portrayed him as a victim of circumstances rather than a criminal capable of killing for pleasure. Being under suspicion in the case of Rebekah's disappearance, White failed a polygraph test. By this time, several bloodstains had been found in his pickup truck, along with a piece of jewelry that seemed to have been torn from the victim's neck, identified as belonging to Rebekah. Despite the obvious suspicion, John continued to insist that he did not know what happened to Rebekah. It was impossible to pin anything on him until the police decided to try to get to him through Sally. He clearly had strong feelings for his new beloved. The authorities decided to take advantage of this opportunity. Detectives detailed to John the process of decomposition of the human body, emphasizing that Sally had lost her beloved daughter and that her 3-year-old son had lost his mother. The police mentioned that Sally would suffer tremendously but did not deserve any of this. Therefore, John would be better off telling everything he knew about the situation. After this, they left him alone for a while and the strategy worked. He said he wanted to talk to the detectives. When they called him, they allowed him to. Of course, John dialed Sally's number. He told her that he loved her more than life itself, but after what he did, she would never want to be with him. He didn't clarify what had happened, but he apologized profusely to her, after which he quickly hung up, not waiting for a response. She probably understood everything without explanation. After that, John turned to the investigators and said he wanted to be isolated for life in prison. Following these words, the criminal confessed in full detail to the murder of Rebekah Guy. John told officers that several weeks before the crime, he had experienced obsessive fantasies about his beloved daughter. According to him, this had been going on for much longer, but in the last few weeks, it had become literally unbearable. The night before Halloween, he visited perverted adult sites dedicated to necrophilia, and Rebekah reappeared in his head. By this point, he was quite drunk and decided to visit his young mother. The pastor came to her around 2 a.m. and found that the door was not locked. He went inside, and when Rebekah came out to the noise, he hit her on the head several times with a hammer. She only managed to look back and say, "I know you," before she lost consciousness. Then the man pulled a plastic tie around the victim's neck and sat her on a chair in front of him, enjoying the spectacle of her slow death. When the agony was over, White dragged the victim into the kitchen and undressed her. Despite his necrophiliac fantasies, John could not remember whether he had violated the body or not. Thinking about what had happened, the killer returned home and collected various towels and cloths to wrap Rebekah's body. He also used everything to clean up, carefully collected the bloody items, put them in a bag, and threw them into the bed of his pickup truck. During the process, he accidentally cut through the bag, so some blood spilled out, getting inside, along with the torn necklace. There was little time left before convoy woke up, so John hurriedly destroyed the victim's mobile phone to stop the messages from coming to him. He collected a bag with items from the house, scattered them in several garbage containers around the trailer park, hoping this would throw the detectives off the scent. White dragged the victim into the kitchen and undressed her. Despite his necrophiliac fantasies, John could not remember whether he had violated the body or not. After reflecting on what had happened, the killer returned home and collected various towels and cloths to wrap Rebekah's body. He used these to clean up, carefully collecting the bloody items, placing them in a bag, and throwing them into the bed of his pickup truck. During this process, he accidentally cut through the bag, causing a little blood to leak out, which got inside along with the torn necklace. There was little time left before the child woke up. In a hurry, John destroyed the victim's mobile phone to stop any incoming messages. He gathered a bag of items from the house and scattered them in several garbage containers around the trailer park. According to White, this was intended to throw the detectives off the scent. He deliberately parked Rebekah's car away from the house to mislead the investigation. All this time, the 3-year-old child was in the house with the body of his murdered mother asleep. When John returned, he hid Rebekah's body in the sofa and waited until the child woke up, calmly taking him to his father. Afterward, he began to dispose of the body, throwing it nearby. The body of 20-year-old Rebekah was eventually found in the indicated location, about a kilometer from her house. There were signs of strangulation on her neck, which was determined to be the cause of death. The young mother also received several blows to the head, though these were not fatal. Autopsy results showed the presence of abrasions indicating sexual violence against Rebekah, either while she was still alive or shortly after death. John continued to claim that he did not remember this. Apparently, he subconsciously understood the horror of the crime he had committed, and thus could not admit it to himself. Following this, John White was charged with first-degree murder and arrested. When the information spread to the public, people were shocked to learn how much of a violent psychopath had been hiding among them. They were outraged that the authorities had not placed him on the list of criminals prone to sexual assault, nor had they notified local residents about who had moved to the city and become a pastor in the local church. Many believed that negligence on the part of the authorities had led to Rebekah's death. In March 2013, John made a deal with the prosecution, agreeing to confess to first-degree murder in exchange for a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Throughout the interrogations, he displayed a chilling detachment, as if reading from a script. After the trial, he was sentenced to 85 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 56 years. However, John was not destined to occupy a prison cell for long. Just 4 months after the start of his sentence on August 28, 2013, the murderer and repeat offender was found in his cell without a sign of life. This was not the first time he had attempted to take his own life. Now he had succeeded. The police believe that John White is connected to a number of hidden crimes. What do you think about this story? Be sure to write in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and like the video.